Hello everyone, it is Justice, and we're doing a face-to-face video again. I wanted to talk about mental health and journaling, and I figured that's kind of something that would be best if you kind of do a face-to-face video. And particularly, I wanted to talk about my mental health and something that affects me on a very daily basis, honestly minute-to-minute basis, is autism spectrum disorder. I am autistic. That's something that is starting to become more talked about, but it's not necessarily widely known just yet. And so I kind of wanted to talk about me and how it affects me, because for those of you that don't quite understand it, autism isn't something that's just like, oh, it's someone who's really quirky and doesn't understand social situations. Like, that's definitely part of it, but it's a complete rewiring of the brain almost. It's a lot of sensory information and the brain not knowing how, or rather what to do with the inputs, and just different ways of thinking and different processes. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. And with journaling, that's something that people implement a lot into their lives in order to help with their mental health, and that's no different for me. Part of me thinks, and this is just a wild opinion, this is going to be a very chatty video. If you haven't figured it out already, you may want to grab like a tea or a coffee and then we can sit and just talk together. But there's not going to be any rhyme or reason to this. I've tried to record it before and I had like a 3 or 4 point system laid out with subpoints beyond the points, but every single time I recorded it, it just didn't sound right. It just sounded very boring to me whenever I would rewatch them back, because you can tell that I'm trying to remember or trying to read off of something. And so I figured that this way would be better. One, because it's going to be more authentic, which the internet loves, but also I think that it's more likely that people will actually watch if there is a human and a personality behind the words versus me pointing my little camera at my journal being like, hello, I am autistic. Here are some reasons why journaling may benefit you because it benefits me as an autistic person, you know. So I have some things here to keep me company while we're talking. So if you hear jingling or if you see fidgeting, I have to be doing something. It's just impossible for me to not be doing something. And that is the ADHD, but also with autism, stimming, very fun. For those of you that aren't aware, stimming is kind of just, I don't quite know a good definition, but something that you do that calms you. So a lot of people will do this with their hands, or they'll rock back and forth. It's just a calming thing to release energy in a good way. So I have these here. It's just impossible for me to sit still. Back to journaling. This is what my channel is all about, journaling. Here is my actual diary. Figured that she would want to come along with this journey. So something that helps me a lot is journaling. Something that impacts me a lot is not quite knowing what feeling I am experiencing, or having a lot of thoughts but not quite knowing how to work through them. And so part of what I do in my journal, and you can probably see that while I'm talking, it's really difficult for me to maintain a thought process and also just to understand what words want to come next, but elaborating in my journal so I can actually understand what I want to talk about. So say for example, something happened to me that day and I just felt off the whole day after that, not quite sure why. It will help me to write it down, one, so I can remember it, and then two, so I can try to explore that idea, that concept, that experience, and see why I may have responded in that way. That's something that can benefit everyone, not just the neurodiverse. I think that a lot of people aren't introspective, and that's completely normal. I am not naturally introspective, but I think that it's a practice that can really benefit us all. That, and also it helps you find patterns. So something with everyone, something with all humans is habit. And with habit comes patterns. You may not understand that you live in a cycle, and honestly, a lot of us do. So an example of that, I think, so I'm gonna say this. It's something that my partner noticed a whole lot sooner than I noticed. He just didn't tell me, but I thought that I came to it all on my own. I am a cisgender female. With that comes periods and the menstrual cycle. I had no idea that the week before my cycle came, the world was just a lot harder to deal with. It's a lot harder for me to take in loud noises, bright lights. I get very irritable. It becomes harder for me to actually go through day-to-day processes. And so things that are very normal, such as putting away laundry, packing a lunch, remembering to drink water, those kind of fall by the wayside because it's more difficult for me to get them. And coming with that also is extreme irritation. And part of that is, one, hormone changes, but two, the hormone changes make it more difficult for me to undergo day-to-day life. And that's not anything that I ever noticed. I always thought that I was just like the cool girl. My period's not that bad. Like, yeah, I get cramps, but it's not. Girl, you're not different. You're just like everyone else. Stop trying to be different. And so my partner would notice that my cycle was coming if I was just way irritable. Like if I was wearing my earplugs more often, if I was going to bed earlier, or at least trying to go to bed earlier, if I was snapping a bit more often. And I don't mean like, I mean like very unhappy, bitter speaking, that type of thing. So that's something that I started to notice in my journal, because the weeks before my cycle, I would either stop writing, write very seldom, or whenever I did write, it was just, well, I'm upset, I'm bitter, I'm annoyed, I'm irritated. So that, I'm almost 25. You would think I would have figured that out in my teen years, but no, I didn't. So that kind of makes me wonder, what else can I notice in my writing that I am experiencing as a cycle within life? That probably could have been condensed into much smaller of a sentence, but it didn't really work out that well. So it helps me recognize cycles. It helps me elaborate on feelings, understand why something happened, and those two things go very together. Something that I touched on before was memory. I have very poor executive dysfunction, or I have a lot of executive dysfunction. My brain doesn't always work the best, is what I'm saying. I experience a lot of brain fog, and my memory is not my BFF. And so something that I rely on a lot is writing, whether it be notes to myself, reminders, writing something down in my physical planner so that I don't forget it later on. That is something that I rely on so deeply, because with things like a Google Calendar or iCal, I cannot be bothered to really look at the notifications, because I know that you can set it up to where you have an event, you have a time, you have the title, you have all the details that you need, as long as you input it into that calendar thing, and it'll send you a reminder. And so you'll get the little notification on your phone like, hey, by the way, pest control is coming tomorrow, you should probably plan for that. The digital world just does not connect with me in a way that actually resonates. I have so many notifications on my phone, I ignore it. I don't care, I ignore it. Every single month, I probably have at least 7 reoccurring tasks. No idea what they are. Scratch that. I do. One of them is to pay the internet bill, but I never look at it because I pay the internet bill with all of the other bills. So why would that even be a reoccurring calendar task? Have I turned it off? No, can't be bothered to. But that's just to say, online notifications, app notifications, they don't really work for me. And so instead what I have to do is use my handy dandy day planner. And skipping to some pages that I can show, I have a weekly setup. This is a Travelers Company weekly vertical. And I also have just a monthly layout. I need weekly, I need monthly, I need daily. So what I do is, this is kind of my, I don't want to say pre-planning. Pre-planning is not the word I'm looking for. Future planning. So if I want to schedule an oil change in advance, I'll write it down here. If I'm dog sitting in a few months, I'll write it down. I felt like I needed to burp, so I wanted to inhale and suck it in. Okay. If I'm dog sitting, if I have a girls' day planned, if I have a hair appointment planned, if I don't want to forget that family is coming in town, I will put that all in here. If I have time off that I've scheduled, I'll put it in here. This way, whenever I'm going through my weeks to set up, I can check and make sure that there's nothing that I would have forgotten that was scheduled way in advance. Because I guarantee it, I would not have remembered. Fun story. I future planned for one of my very good friends, Brittany, to come down and visit. I did not look at my calendar, and given I am generally very good at it, this was just like a one-off time where I did not look at it, or if I did, my brain processed it in an incorrect way where I was thinking that the day that I was currently looking at the calendar was not that day, and so whatever was coming was not impacting me. Anyways, she was coming from like a 6-hour drive away so that we could visit each other. I had no idea until it was like the day before, and she messaged me like, hey, by the way, and I looked at my calendar because I was like, oh no, I would know when you're coming. I would know this. I planned for this. Lo and behold, it was in my calendar. So that's just an illusion that kind of discredits why paper planning is very nice, but it's a one-off situation, honey. Don't worry about it. So I use this for future planning. And then this is weekly planning. I mostly use this for appointments, times I need to be out of the house, things that I cannot miss, scheduled phone calls, that type of thing. And also if I have to block out a day of the weekend because I'm spending time with someone or I have to do an errand. I want that here so that I can like physically see it on the calendar, or rather on the schedule, on the agenda. With my highlighter, I'll block out the hours so that I can visually see this period of time I will be useless. I will be doing something else. That's that. That's how I find my weekly spreads to be the most helpful. I don't like to put to-dos or anything on them just because I don't have enough room, but it's very helpful for me to be able to see the full week and the hours that I may have previous obligations, because it helps me understand where I need to space things out. And onto this guy. This is kind of a bullet journal. So not only is it my diary, but I also do daily tasks. So I'm trying to see if there's a page that I can share with you. Here, I'll show you this. So I do a lot of tasks, and this was an example of a day where it was intended for me to knock out a lot of things. That's typically a Saturday. But on that day, only a few things got checked off because I had an allergic reaction. And so things didn't really go as they were supposed to. To give you some preface, probably 3 days before that, I had the bulk of my allergic reaction, been to the doctor, got put on all kinds of medication, and I thought that I was over it. And so Saturday, I started just doing all kinds of stuff. I went on a walk, I went to go change the battery in one of our motorcycles, and that knocked me out. And so I couldn't do any of the rest of the things that I had intended to do. But that's kind of how I like to organize things. I'll do an entire long list. I'll put little stars or highlight next to the things that have to be done that day or are very important to me to be done that day, or I would very much like to get done that day. I'm not very hard on myself, otherwise I would really dislike myself. So I encourage that you are not very hard on yourself for your tasks as well. And if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. However, I still have that little checkbox to tell me this needs to happen. So one thing, I'm trying to think of a thing that I have pushed a lot. Mopping the floor. So I'll sweep. Sweeping is quite easy to me, but mopping the floor is a little bit more difficult, and so it gets pushed more often because not only is it a chore in itself, but it has to happen in a particular sequence. So you have to tidy the floor, get anything off of the floor. If the dog chewed up a toy, you have to remove all of the fluff. Then you can vacuum the carpet. Then you can sweep. And then after sweeping, you can then mop, and then you have to wait for the floor to dry. It's very rare for me to do all of those things, and I have to do the sweeping and the vacuuming in that order, then mopping. Can't tell you why, it's part of my brain, but the mopping aspect takes a little bit of time to get to, so that's something to where it'll take a couple of days for me to draw an arrow, and then I'll get to it. So that's something to where I think a normal person can walk into a house and be like, oh, the floors need a mop. They're looking a little bit dingy. Not me. I will ignore it. I am amazing at ignoring. So if I have it in my planner instead of, you need to mop, then that's a little bit easier. So that's kind of talking about some things that help me with my journal, because a lot of people have asked me, you have kept journals for years. I don't understand what you even write about at this point. I write about what is in my brain to try and understand what is in it, because I don't really get it. And then two, normal day-to-day things that a lot of people can do, they're not very easy for me. And so I try to use my journals as a crutch to help me with that. That along with habits. Habits are a whole lot harder to form. You can watch any white male that is probably into tech talk about habits and all of those things, and how they wake up at 6 a.m. and then they exercise and then they eat and then they meditate and then it's somehow noon and they still make a lot of money. Not even gonna get started there, but I don't even know if this video is even helpful anymore, but I think that it's best that you can kind of see how organically my brain works so that you can understand how it genuinely is very helpful for me to have things written down and refer to. Yeah, so to summarize, hi, I'm Justice. I'm autistic. I journal a lot. Part of that is because it's a hobby, and part of that is because I feel like I really need it to help me cope with day-to-day life, whether it be understanding my emotions, understanding my thought processes and where they're going, because I may have a thought that's half-baked and I need to see it all the way through to understand what's going on, to act as a memory aid because my executive function is quite low, and so it helps me not completely forget and have my life go into shambles. So I would love to know what you do with your writing. If you're someone that's already in the stationery community, honestly, I would love to know what you do a lot in your journals, and also how you think that helps you. Are you like me, where you have a lot of things going on that you kind of feel like you need a crutch for, or do you just love to do it for pure hobby? Let me know. If you like this video, please like, and if you want to see more, subscribe. Anyways, thank you. Have a good one.